all the evidence from near-death experience and from other sources, there really is an afterlife. Consciousness does survive bodily death. In my study, over 90% pinpoint accurate in all details that they're seeing and hearing.
What is the most dramatic death and return that you've witnessed?
Vicky was born totally blind. To Vicky, vision was unknown and unknowable and was involved in a very severe car wreck. So the first time Vicky had vision in her life, she was having a near-death experience. She was in the emergency room, her consciousness was over the body, and boom, down below, she saw
Dr. Jeffrey Law, thank you for being here.
the pleasure.
What is actually happening in the human system when consciousness leaves the body?
There's absolutely no physical brain explanation that would account for consciousness being apart from the body under any circumstances. Near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, fear-death experiences. If there's consciousness apart from the body and what you're seeing and hearing, that perception is found to be accurate with information that they could not have possibly had from the source of their physical body. For example, out-of-body experiences, and again, here we have scores and scores, probably over 100 by now, hundreds, where these out-of-body observations are geographically far from the physical body, way beyond any possible physical sensory awareness. In near-death experiences, we have these observations at, say, city blocks, more than a mile away from the physical body. There's absolutely no way your physical body sensory awareness could create those perceptions going at that point in time with your consciousness separated. So there really is absolutely no possible Western physical explanation for these huge number of reported experiences, both on my website and published in the scholarly literature. So it's really, a lot of my colleagues call it a challenge to materialist views or views that all of our consciousness cannot be anything beyond the physical brain. In my opinion, it actually refutes it. I do, however, acknowledge that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And so that's why this consciousness apart from the body, and again, it's near-death experiences and under other circumstances, is so profoundly compelling that you, me, every single person watching this video is far more than just our physical brain, that there's some part of us, there's some immaterial part of us, and all the evidence from near-death experience and from other sources is all converging on the reality that there really is an afterlife.
What culture or perspective has the best instrumentation or tools or lens on this version of reality to be able to share a vantage point on this? Because if you were to, I can guarantee you, because I've had these conversations, and if you have these conversations with any shaman anywhere, in any hut, in any place, they're like, yeah, bro. Like, you're like, of course, like, this is our whole world. And from a Western mind, this is wild.
Yeah, this is really an interesting question. I think anybody, and I'm hesitant to use the word enlightened, but understands the reality of human beings having more than a physical body and a physical brain and having the ability to have these conscious experience. I mean, anybody that has that enlightenment, perhaps a better word is understanding, certainly those that have experiences, shamans, people that have near-death experiences, many other people that have other types of experiences that know this, they're all aware from personal experience, which is perhaps the greatest teacher, that there really is more going on than we know from physical senses. So I would have to say it's really worldwide. Any cultural person who has that experience, who has that understanding, is on board with the reality that there's consciousness apart from the body and that can exist, and that's actually a very normal and natural part of the human condition under either induced or non-induced exceptional situations.
With everything that you have learned from the near-death experiences and the people that you've studied, what religion aligns the best from your perspective?
I've actually used artificial intelligence to scan hundreds of near-death experiences and say what religion seems to be the best alignment with this. And there really isn't, there's no one or even several specific organized religions that really line up with that. There does seem to be philosophical concepts, immaterialism, non-materialism. Actually, interestingly, if you ask artificial intelligence at different times, you'll get some different answers, but several times you're going to get some philosophical concepts that align. And I would be reluctant to just pick one particular philosophical concept and jumping around on that, a little bit about that question. When people have, and that's the group I'm most familiar with, near-death experiences, they don't really align to a specific religious or even a spiritual belief. In fact, the majority of time, they maintain or enhance their pre-existing religious or spiritual belief. If they do have any changes, they're going to be more likely to describe themselves as spiritual but not religious. And that's especially true from those in a religious background where the religious group they're in did not validate or accept their profound near-death experience. So I think it's really, I'd be reluctant to pick one particular philosophy or religion because the evidence of survival of consciousness, of non-physical reality, really for enlightened people can seem to be aligned or at least be compatible with a wide variety of religions and beliefs.
What's the deal with the light? Walking into light, moving towards the light. What is when a person has a near-death experience? What's the light that is commonly, at least like an archetype that I think is commonly shared? I'm not sure how true that is in your research.
Yeah, the light is, of course, one of the most common things described in a near-death experience, and we're all used to light in our earthly everyday life. You see light, bright, dark colors. But in near-death experience, when they say light, a common descriptor is that it's unearthly. It's unlike any other light that they've seen, and it can be variably described, most commonly white, but it can be described as a whole spectrum of colors. It can be described bright to the point that they say it's like one near-death experiencer said 1,000,000 times 1,000,000 suns, but essentially never hurts their eyes, and they don't really have physical eyes at that point, that their consciousness is apart from the body. But the perception is that it is incredibly bright and doesn't really cause discomfort. And in fact, if they describe any awareness, emotional, or any kind of attachment to the light, it seems to be considered to be a loving presence. It can be considered to be something that draws it to them. So there's a whole host of seeming things that light does during a near-death experience or other exceptional human experiences that's all part of just it being a unique spiritual experience to that particular person, and yet it seems to be very different from anything they've known during their earthly life.
How homogeneous or similar are people's near-death experiences? And do you have any recounts of an disordinarily, what's the word for disordinarily? Unordinarily? Any accounts that were especially bizarre?
Yeah. Well, there's no two near-death experiences that are the same. So, and again, that's after studying thousands and reading, probably 1,000 more published in scholarly literature. So near-death experiences are unique. They're as unique as the individual that has them. And yet, in the spectrum of near-death experiences, what I found, and basically every other near-death experience researcher, is that they have a common pattern of characteristics. What happens during the near-death experience, and most commonly in a very consistent order. We talked about that out-of-body experience. A common next characteristic would be passing into or through a tunnel. Often, just as we were saying, at the end of the tunnel, there may be that beautiful unearthly light. They can be drawn to it. They may be in an unearthly, often referred to as a heavenly realm, which is radically different from Earth in many ways. Time is either radically different or non-existent. Movement is non-physical. Communication is invariably, in the best English word, is telepathic. They may encounter deceased loved ones. They may have a life review, see part or even all of their prior life. And then there may be a decision at the end of the experience about whether to stay in that beautiful heavenly realm or return to Earth. And then, interestingly, even though with a near-death experience, their physical body is unconscious or even clinically dead because of their trauma, accident, or illness, throughout near-death experiences, almost invariably, it's described as a profound sense of love, peace, connection, even unity with everything and everyone. So these are very common characteristics that we see with near-death experiences, within the fact that they're all unique or individual for each individual person.
It seems consistent that when people have experiences like that, they, Ram Dass has a bit where it's like death is like taking off a tight shoe, and that your incarnated, embodied, animated life is kind of can feel a little cramped, and in crossing over to what could feel like the other side or be the other side, suddenly it's like this exhale, literal and figurative, and a release and relaxation of the stress and the burden that you've been holding for as long as you've been attached to the story of who you think yourself to be. What do you think or feel is the function of a human holding on to fear and stress while they're in their body?
I mean, you're talking about, sort of a psychological, emotional fear or distress. I mean, good gosh, every single one of us have had fear, had distress, and had that a lot of times. So you could draw upon the laboratory of your own individual life, and you can see that it is quality of life diminishing. I mean, fear, whether it's fear of death or fear of a wide variety of other things, is diminishing. It's hard to focus on loving actions, hard to focus on being the best you can be emotionally if you're gripped with fear. And that can even be, medically speaking, pathological and cause some severe problems. I mean, you're getting into potentially psychological and psychiatric diagnoses. Same thing with stress. If one is, and of course that's often associated with fear, but again, same thing. If you've got distress, whether it's reactive to a particular event or just chronic stress to a wide variety of things, again, very quality of life diminishing. My heart really goes out to that. Obviously, I see that in my medical practice all the time. I treat people with cancer. I'm a full-time radiation oncology doctor. I use radiation to treat cancer, and cancer is a dang scary word for basically everybody. So when you see that distress, it's just really important for people to, especially then more than ever, be with that support group. Be aware that in general, or at least for the great majority of people, fear or stress is going to be diminished over time. And I guess you could proverbially say there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel, and a better, more emotionally balanced, even less stressful, less fearful life after you just get over those, what you're dealing with in your life at that time.
If there was one thing that a person who has had a near-death experience has experienced that could share with someone who has not had an experience like that could enrich that person's life to lead a more fulfilling life, what would one lesson be from a person who's experienced an NDE?
Yeah, virtually every person who's had a near-death experience understands and accepts that the reality of an afterlife. And it's not because they take it on faith. It's not because they heard about it and thought they should believe it. It's not wishful thinking. It's based solidly on personal experience. They know what's beyond death's door because they survived it. They went there. And so I think that's the one perhaps most powerful message, is that it's difficult as life may be, and it's difficult for all of us. And yet there is going to be an afterlife, a wonderful afterlife. That's going to be the destiny for each and every one of us. So life, in fact, one near-death experiencer called our earthly life the boot camp of our spiritual existence, which I think is a real apt analogy. But again, from near-death experiencers, overwhelmingly, consistently, our earthly life is meaningful, it is significant, and at the end of our earthly journey, there is that great beyond, that afterlife, as best I can tell, eternal and infinite. And that's going to be, something I think everybody can hang on to. I think that the reality of an afterlife is literally perhaps the most profound message of hope that is even conceivable for all of humanity.
I'd like to take a moment and thank the sponsor of today's episode. We are brought to you by Huel. These little nutritionally complete meals in a bottle are a lifesaver to me. Each one contains 35 grams of protein, 27 essential vitamins and minerals. They all taste incredibly delicious, and they come in clutch for me anytime I am in a rush. Sometimes I will have not eaten breakfast. I'll come home from a meeting or a training session, and then I won't have very much time before the next meeting. I will grab one of these suckers, out of the fridge. They're cold, they're thick, they're delicious. I love the flavors. They have strawberry banana, which I already finished while I was sitting here. Evidence, they're delicious. Cookies and cream, iced coffee, vanilla, they're all amazing. I like the ingredients. Each one is under $5, so the convenience of that and the price is very affordable. If you want to try it yourself, you can go to huel.com/align15. Align15 will give you 15% off. That's huel.com/align15 for 15% off of your order. Enjoy. Is there a model? I've kind of already asked this, but I'm curious, go deeper into it. Is there a model, epistemological model of the world, or like religious model, or just a lens in the world, if you were to compare atheism compared to Christianity, compared to, Christianity, you go off to a place, there's a binary heaven hell situation going on. Good guys go to heaven, bad guys go to hell. If you don't accept this particular thing, there's like separation there. Buddhism, you reincarnate. It's this ongoing kind of spiral, dynamic, energetic, holographic thing. My consciousness moves on. There's karma that's involved. I can kind of move up the chain, down the chain. Atheism, you go lights out. Like, what can we learn from these different dogmas, and which ones are totally wrong and which ones are on the right trail?
It's very easy to come with an obvious conclusion given the tremendous diversity of religious spiritual beliefs, not only that currently exist among people on Earth, but that have previously existed. I read a study once that indicated that as far as different religious views, there's like literally thousands of different conceptualizations of God. So I think the one overriding thing that we could say in our earthly physical life, they can't all be right. I think it really shows that we all in our physical life, we all have that different path, and that which may change from time to time during our life. And it's, of course, a lot of it has to do with our environment that we're in culturally, as far as other people around us, what their beliefs are. But I think it really shows how, as a human race, we have a long way to go to come to understanding a specific idea about God, a specific idea about afterlife, a specific idea about salvation. That is, I think that's you can't get around that with that overwhelming diversity of thinking from religious and spiritual beliefs. So that's what's so fascinating to me about near-death experiences. And that is, it doesn't make any difference where on the planet they are or what their prior belief system was. Whatever their religious belief system was, even if they were atheists, if they have a near-death experience, the content of the near-death experience is going to be strikingly similar. And that's, to me, especially exciting because all of a sudden I'm thinking, gee, with all that diversity of religion and thinking and spiritual thoughts, and frankly, there's some pretty scary religious thinking out there. And yet shining through all that is the overwhelming consistency of spiritual information and near-death experiences, profoundly good and reassuring message, literally for all of humanity. So it's one of the reasons I'm so excited about continuing my research and bringing forward the messages.
Do you identify with a religion, Dr. Long?
Yeah, I've come from a Christian heritage, so I would identify that to be I'm a Christian. Gosh, hey, look back there. There's the creation of Adam. That's because I wrote a book, God in the Afterlife. That was where the wife got me that. But I consider myself more to be, if you had to, consider a Christian means a zillion different things to a million different people. I would put myself in the spiritual, but not religious, more the category more than just about anything else at this point in time.
Do you believe in a heaven and hell in the afterlife?
Yeah, I think in the afterlife, but I don't conceptualize it the way classic Christian teaching is. Near-death experiences, and it's uncommon, but there are some observations or awareness of a hell. I mean, heaven is very easy. I mean, gosh, you have that afterlife. The great majority, 98% of people in my study that have near-death experiences have that afterlife that you could realistically call heaven. Very apt name. They feel overwhelming sense of peace and love. They're with their deceased people that they knew on earth, joyous reunions, even deceased pets, by the way, joyous reunions from all that they knew in their life. Beauty in that unearthly realm that can be off the scale. Near-death experiencers will say there's colors there that are so beautiful they have no earthly words to describe them. Music
Mm.
may exist in this afterlife that is beyond anything possible on earth in terms of its beauty. So it's true. And of course, time is either radically different or non-existent. There's essentially never any peace, misery. That we talked about, that fear, we talked about that distress. Essentially never in that heavenly realm is that going on. So it's literally a paradise in every sense of the word, literally defining paradise in the environment we hear so consistently from near-death experiencers. But circling back to that concept of hell, why do I believe it? I believe it based on evidence from near-death experiences. Once again, we have dozens that were either aware of hell or were actually encountering hell. Let me explain that. About half the people that encountered or were experiencing hell were aware of it. This is commonly where they're moving at a very rapid pace, often with other people, other spiritual beings, and they become aware of a segregated, separate area in that heavenly realm where they can be aware that there's evil there. And they seem to be aware that there is that separate, distinctly walled off, for lack of a better term, section in heaven where the evil people seem to congregate. So when people say hell cannot possibly exist in heaven, they're literally correct. That's complete. That is, by the descriptions I have in NDEs, quite a few of them separate. For the other half of people that are actually encountering hell, it can be widely discussed. It can be frightening, smells, sounds, beings, and they feel that sense. What I'll tell you, without going into a lot of detail on that, interestingly, my perspective in an afterlife realm where free will predominates, where love predominates, which is overwhelmingly consistent, I think the beings that find themselves, those dark souls in hellish realms that are in that realm, they choose that because they can be with other people that share their values, their beliefs. They're literally, paradoxically, the demonic beings, those souls that are in hell, have actually chosen that because that is to them, paradoxically, their heaven, to be a part of those others that are like them, share their values. They don't have to be known as evil when they're in the midst of other people, beings, souls that were there that are evil. I firmly believe that even in that hellish realm, they have the ability, in the universe ruled by love and free will, that they could choose to leave, but they choose not to. So that's a very different concept of hell than you might see certainly from probably virtually all classic religions. And yet that is the one conceptualization that seems to be consistent with the evidence in near-death experience, and that is concordant with a universe that is ruled by love and free will.
Interesting. How often do people who have near-death experiences report back a sensation of drifting into a hell realm?
Very uncommonly. In my study, again, out of thousands, we have only about 2% that report that. But again, since we're over 4,000, we're talking about, 80, 100 different reports of that. So it's not a small number that I draw this discussion on. It's based on a whole host of evidence. And as far as people actually entering the hellish realm, it's probably, I could say, about half of the people that are aware of a hellish realm. So even, with that, fraction of people that actually encounter a hellish realm, I've still got literally dozens that have had that description.
And for people who have died and left their bodies and come back, how do they describe hell?
Again, there's no one or several even things. Sort of like that heavenly beautiful realm. There's a lot of different things that it can look like, different appearances. Hellish realms are the same way. They are populated. However, there's other beings there. There's a demonic. They can look frightening. They can look damaged. There can be frightening sounds, frightening smells. There can be a sense of fear at that point in time that simply does not exist in that basically heavenly realm. So that's how it's somewhat like a classic conceptualization of hell, but it's also very significant in other ways too. What goes on in hell, it can be significantly variably described, but that's a little bit about hell. One thing I would say, as long as we're going to focus on hell and get into that, for the benefit of all your viewers, I want to emphasize at this point that me and I think virtually every other near-death experience researcher does not believe that you, me, or anybody viewing this is at risk for an involuntary permanent hell. Again, I think these are people that choose that because of their basically their spiritual sickness would be as good a way to describe it as any.
Whoa. Is there such a thing as good and evil in the world? And if there is evil, is there such a thing as a human being that is inherently evil?
Right. I don't think human beings are inherently evil. I mean, good gosh, when we're born, our personality, who we are, what we are, is dependent on a lot of things. I think there can be genetic, perhaps predispositions to evil. There can be psychosis, brain dysfunction that may predispose that. But heck no, I don't think anybody is born evil. I think evil in general, by my conceptualization and definition, is product of a choice. In other words, if you are involuntarily, evil, that's not evil. Like with a severe psychiatric illness, that's not evil. Evil, I think, is a product of a choice, often a product of many, many choices, all leading in the direction of a more substantial evil being. So evil, I think, is a reality. I mean, you don't have to look far in this world or to read much of the news to realize that evil is a reality in this world. And yet I think that's a challenge for the rest of us to know that that is a reality, but it's also a challenge for the rest of us to help work with those that are evil, to help, if you will, bring them around, diminish to the greatest extent possible their adverse effects on other people, environment, or the world as it may be, and help work with other people to encourage them in the greatest possible way not to go down or to continue to go down that path of evil.
Would it be fair to suggest that evil is rooted in pain and trauma? Or is there such a thing as just someone that just likes to fuck shit up and it just feels good, but there's no pain, no trauma? There's just an inherent glitch where they're kind of tied to this metaphoric concept of bad or whatever you want to call it. Lucifer, Satan, which the root of Lucifer is light as well. So I think where there's a lot, like when we get into like the moralistic bad good thing, a lot of alarm bells go off for me because I feel like we're kind of getting a little bit lost. And my feeling is that if someone is quote unquote bad or acting in a way that is quote unquote sinful, my very strong feeling is that it's just rooted in pain and trauma, and that person actually, the solution is love and the solution is light, and casting them off into some what I think to be illusory place of fire and brimstone, and they're going to be poked and prodded and electrocuted and ridiculed for their whole life because they were a bad boy or bad girl in this human plane, to me makes absolutely no sense. And my sensation is those people actually would be the ones that actually need the most love. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, let's talk about definitions. When you start talking about bad people, I think the most loving, compassionate conceptualization is not to use very bluntly, and you know this, bad is a pejorative term. So in the scholarly literature, we like to refer to it as pro-social and antisocial beings and actions. So bad, again, is a global judgment, but again, evil is a choice, and evil is defined as evil is what evil does. So it can be caused by a whole host of things. It can be caused by psychological problems. It can be caused by fear. Absolutely. It can be caused by trauma. I don't think you can simply say, fear or trauma is the root of all evil. I think that's more than a little simplistic, because you could have believe me, you can have psychiatric dysfunctions. I've seen that as a physician that can result in people being that way. I think you can have people that are egotistical, that are wrapped up in themselves, that act out because there's some kind of a psychological thing. So I think it's very multifactorial as to what makes it.
Wouldn't those always be compensatory strategies though, of some sort? Like some type of, if a person's an egomaniac, typically they're protecting themselves against a deeper rooted insecurity. I think there's no absolutes, there's nuance to all things, but if a person really feels deeply safe and calm and confident and at ease and like surrendered to life, and they're like, man, I just feel so good, I feel so loved, arrogance doesn't really exist in that person that much usually. Like, I believe arrogance is a compensatory strategy, and I would imagine most psychopathological arisals or manifestations probably would be like some form of compensation as well that comes out as like a maladaptive compensation.
Right.
You know what I'm
I
saying?
think, yeah, I
Sorry
think
for
the key,
interrupting you.
no, it's okay. Yeah, the key thing you said was most, and I think that's probably a good perspective, not
Yeah.
to lose sight of the, it can be tremendously multifactorial. I mean, you're really down to what motivates people to act in an antisocial way. And I don't think you can stick with just one or several descriptors or environmental, social, or cultural pressors that led to them choosing that evil. So again, I think it's a very strong interplay of just a whole host of genetics, psychology, aspects, environmental, very strong. It's sort of like people. You could look at it from this way, actually. Why is it people choose to be pro-social or good or loving? So look at it from that perspective. Well, again, it's not because they don't have fear, they don't have distress. That's certainly a very important part of them acting in a pro-social way, but there's a whole host again of environmental influences, decisions. They decide that that's what they want to do, a choice, a free will
Yeah.
choice to be that way, just as you can have a free will choice to be antisocial or, if you will, evil. So I think it's you start getting into just a huge laundry list of all the different possibilities that would lead to someone being either pro-social or antisocial.
What's up, guys? I want to take a moment and share a word from our sponsors. We are sponsored by this delicious longevity gummy referred to as Timeline. So Timeline contains a supplement called urolithin A. This is the #1 doctor recommended urolithin A supplement. What it does is it helps for you to renew your mitochondria. They're known as the powerhouse of your cells. If you feel drained, if you feel sluggish, if your recovery is not that great, urolithin A is a supplement that can be supportive with the renewal of healthy mitochondria for you, so you feel more energetic. It's good for your longevity, it's good for your recovery, etc. If you want to try these delicious, this is strawberry flavor. They're genuinely very good. You're only supposed to eat 2. I usually eat like 4 to 5. Hopefully that's okay. Then you can go to timeline.com/align30 and you will get 30% off of your order. That's timeline.com/align30. If you want to try Timeline yourself, the link is in the description. I think you guys will enjoy. So heaven and hell, do you have what's
Yeah,
that?
isn't this a thought-provoking discussion? So carry on.
Yeah.
It's great.
Heaven and hell, do you feel like there is a objective location where this exists, or do we have to get into interdimensional planes where it's again outside of Western language and concepts, and you kind of have to venture outward? Like, is there a material objective location for these places, or do they exist in where do they exist?
The only location, if you will, as broadly defined that I'm aware of, there's hell's what I see consistently. And again, it's a basic scientific concept. What's real is consistently observed. So if you start with that foundation, near-death experience does have some fairly consistent descriptions, awareness of that hell environment, but it's always in that unearthly realm. It's sort of a subset, walled off, sectioned off area of the afterlife. And that is so radically different from our three-dimensional world that you could literally say it's a multi-dimensional would be reasonable for an approximation, but I don't think that, certainly from my perspective, I'm not a believer, or nor do I see the evidence that there is a three-dimensional physical realm of hell that is a specific location in the three-dimensional earthly realm that we know of.
If death feels so good, why do we stay in our bodies for so long?
That's another insight from near-death experiencers that's very profoundly important. I've published the largest study that's ever been presented on what we call the after effects, or how people change after a near-death experience. My series was 834 people that had a near-death experience. And one of the key survey questions we asked was their belief in the meaning and significance of our earthly life. And we asked them to compare that belief prior to them basically having their near-death experience. And then at the time they shared it with our survey, and median and average of about 15 years later. And it was like literally orders of magnitude increased belief in people that had a near-death experience, believing and accepting and living in their own life the importance, significance, and meaning of our earthly life. So again, there seems to be, even when life is difficult, even when we seem so downtrodden, even when it seems there can't possibly be any meaning, there absolutely is. Each one of us are here. Our earthly journeys are extremely important, not only to yourself and to others around you in our physical earthly plane, but it also seems to be very important in a sense in the afterlife with other souls too. So our earthly life is meaningful, even, if you will, trans-dimensionally above and beyond what we would be aware of in our physical earthly life. We're all here to learn. We're all here to grow. We're all here to have lessons. Those are some of the more common descriptors of meaning and why it's so important.
How confident are you in everything you're saying?
Again, what we don't know about near-death experiences exceed what we do know. So I am simply talking from my body of thousands of near-death experiences. So by the time I see these concepts, that most of what I'm talking about here are at least hundreds, if not over 1,000 different experiences describing that. So I think my thought that I could be way wrong is, very, very small. Again, it's the same kind of decision process I do as a physician when I choose the proper best treatment for my patients with cancer. You look at the evidence, you pick the best evidence. Why did you pick that treatment? Well, here's all the studies, here's the evidence. And if it all converges on that being the best treatment for cancer, that's what I do. The same thing in near-death experience research. By the time you get literally a mountain of data, and there is a little bit of, there can be inconsistency in what's described, but it is a very small percentage of near-death experiences that are, if you will, outliers. And I've actually looked carefully for, when I say what I'm saying here, it's not just that I look through near-death experiences with rose-colored glasses. I have aggressively, actually both through my own analysis of near-death experiences and with now recently with augmentation with artificial intelligence, going through the same thought process, looking for both consistencies and inconsistencies in the accounts. So it's only when I aggressively look and search for inconsistencies and don't find them that I can then, with full confidence, say these really are the consistencies. So I've worked literally for over 25 years on this, and aware of the importance of what I'm bringing forward to the earth about messages of near-death experiences. I have been extremely cautious and diligent to make sure I'm bringing forward the proper message and that I have the evidence for it.
What is the most dramatic story of death and return that you've witnessed? Has someone been flatline for 10 minutes, for 5 minutes? What is the absolute brink where if you're down for this long, you ain't coming back? Like, how far have people pushed it?
With near-death experiences, obviously all of them recovered from their life-threatening event and came back. In fact, interestingly, one major study found that the physically closest you were, closer to death, you were more likely to have a near-death experience, which is, again, yet another one of the myriad of arguments against brain function causing near-death experiences. But if I had to just share one of the more dramatic near-death experiences that I've encountered, I would say, I treasure all near-death experiences shared with me that are published, shared on our website, shared with me in person. But one that really sunk home and really started my awareness from many, many years ago about near-death experiences being absolutely inexplicable by physical brain function was a lady named Vicky. Vicky was born totally blind. To Vicky, vision was unknown and unknowable. And believe me, you cannot explain vision in terms of the remaining 4 physical bodily senses. And I know that. I tried, and other people tried. And, there's no way Vicky can understand that. Vision is a unique sense. But anyway, Vicky, born totally blind, was a gifted singer. So she was singing in a nightclub one night, and an unfortunately highly inebriated patron was driving her home and was involved in a very severe car wreck. So the first time Vicky had vision in her life, she was having a near-death experience. She was in the emergency room. Her consciousness was over the body, and boom, down below, she saw a body. And her initial emotional reaction was fascinating. She was horrified because vision was so unfamiliar. It was a completely new sense. So she had to calm down a little bit. And it was only after she got after that emotional fright, literally, that she realized this is vision, and that body down there she could correlate by the feel of her long hair, and which neither of us have, I might add, and she could also feel the ring that her father gave her, and only knew from the sense of the feel of it, boom, now she could see that was the ring on her finger. That's when she realized it was her. Vicky went on to have a very detailed near-death experience, tunnel, heavenly realm, encountering deceased loved ones. Vicky, as many other near-death experiencers, a minority, but still, again, commonly described in that concept of being a minority, Vicky's vision was 360 degrees, which means she simultaneously was aware of visual ongoings in front of her, behind her, right, left, up, down. And while 360-degree vision is the common term of art, technically, geometrically, that's spherical vision that she was seeing. So she had a highly detailed near-death experience. And when I talked to Vicky about the fact that those of us living our earthly life that have earthly vision, it's restricted into basically a pie-shaped visual field because of the location of our eyes in the skull, the socket, and surrounding structures. We can only see like pie-shaped field. And Vicky literally laughed at me and said, "That can't be true. Why are you so constrained? I mean, vision is for, why can't you see front, back, right, left?" Because that's all she knew in her life. So that really got my attention. For somebody born totally blind with a highly visual near-death experience, that almost single-handedly is a powerful argument that near-death experiences simply cannot possibly be due to physical brain function. But that one really sunk home with me. That was relatively early in my near-death experience research and convinced me as much perhaps as any other single near-death experience I've heard.
I have a feeling that I have experienced, and I think I have a feeling that you might disagree. I've experienced what dying could close to feel like with smoking a tremendous amount of DMT. Not a tremendous, like overdoing it, but like full proper dose of DMT. And the sensation of feeling like the stress of my personhood dissolving temporarily, and just feel like going through, and like a lot of the things that you describe in the near-death experience were very, very similar. And I'm not saying that to flex that I smoke DMT. I don't care about that in the slightest. The reason I'm asking that is, what is the role of endogenous DMT in the system? It arises during near-death experiences, from my understanding, and dream state in certain situations. So, like, what is DMT doing in our body? And is there some way to potentially get a glimpse into a near-death experience with exogenous DMT?
Okay. Well, let's talk about taking DMT and its relation to near-death experiences. So, number one, I co-authored a scholarly study that reviewed content of near-death experiences and compared it to scholarly published literature on a whole variety of psychotropic, that is, brain-acting drugs, and we have published in the Proceedings of the New York Academy of Sciences, a major journal. Bottom line, without going through pages and pages of that, is that it was considered that what happens during a near-death experience distinctly different from psychotropic drugs, of which DMT is a subset. So at least in that careful review of the scholarly literature, there really didn't seem to be a comparison. But secondly, if anybody is really interested, and importantly, in believing that DMT has anything to do with near-death experiences, if there's any similarity, I invite anyone interested to saunter over to a website called erowid.org, EROWID.org. There you can find literally thousands of psychotropic drug experiences and at least hundreds and hundreds of people that shared their own DMT experience and then put it up there. So if you read 20, 30 DMT experiences from there and go to NDERF, NDERF.org, and read 20 or 30 near-death experiences there, you can vividly see from yourself that that's substantially different types of experiences, what happens. For instance, DMT experiences as a group, as described by people that have them, are far more likely to be frightening. They're more likely to be hallucinatory. They're more likely to have events skip around. They're more likely to have basically unreal characteristics that are basically all but unknown in near-death experiences. And then we've had out of our thousands of people sharing experiences, we've had a number of people share that, yes, they had a near-death experience, but they will, without asking, share and compare it to their own psychotropic, including DMT experiences. And in general, they say these two experiences are completely different. And that's corroborated by one of the very well-known near-death experience authors, Dr. Eben Alexander, who had a very detailed, he's actually it's been a Harvard neurosurgeon. So he's a very prominent individual and just brilliant as all get out, obviously. But he had a stunning near-death experience due to meningitis or brain inflammation. And they gave him under carefully controlled circumstances and published it in a scholarly peer review article, an interview with Dr. Alexander after he had his near-death experience and took DMT and asked him to compare the experiences. But bottom line, no similarity between the two experiences. So I think there may be a little bit of overlap, but these are apples way beyond apples and oranges in terms of not just DMT, but literally any psychotropic drug. So my experience, having looked at this and researched this and studied this, the endogenous DMT or any other psychoactive, not naturally occurring things, we could get endorphins or enkephalins, do not seem in any way to rationally be associated with the cause of what happens in a near-death experience. I mean, look, we have near-death experiences occurring while you're under general anesthesia and your heart stops. I mean, there's nothing in the brain, electrical, chemical, that could possibly result in a conscious experience when you're literally doubly impossible to have a conscious experience. So again, I have always been, and especially speaking medically, I've always strongly encouraged people not to take psychotropic drugs, not among the least of which they're illegal and can be dangerous, in any effort to have anything that would possibly be similar to a near-death experience. In general, it's not going to happen.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm not encouraging it. And where I've taken it, it's been legal. Well, I guess I've taken it illegal places as well, but where I've taken it, it hasn't been illegal. And it was under the guidance and care of, a person that does that professionally. And there's like medical people, and there's like a whole thing. My intuition is all I'm basing that off of. And it felt like intuitively like, this seems like suspiciously close to maybe what the sensation would be. What is the role of endogenous, i.e. like created within the body, DMT in near-death experiences or a death experience? Is there any association?
No, there's, as we discussed,
really?
Endogenous DMT is in extremely small amounts. It's not existing in the body naturally or even under stress in a quantity that would be expected to produce a psychotropic, significant conscious modifying experience. So, while there's a lot of buzz, there's a lot of urban myth to be especially with psychotropic drugs. There's a huge body of an urban myth floating around there. I invite anybody who's interested in that to get their information from, you can go to Wikipedia, if you will. Just go to find, scholarly or scholarly derived sources, and you'll learn about the truth. But again, especially when it involves something potentially dangerous like illicit substances, I would caution against it. And again, do your own research from credible sources and not off of other YouTube videos or not, the flotsam and jetsam of non-credible sources. And let's not forget, if you hear from people that have used DMT illegally, don't forget people that use illegal substances are, as a group, far less likely to be reliable than people that don't use illegal substances. So you have to be careful about what they describe about their experience. But I mean,
wow. Oh yeah, broadly speaking. But then you'd have to say like Francis Crick is no good. You'd have to say there's a lot of people who he's the guy that put together the whole double helix concept with DNA and such. There's a lot of Steve Jobs, don't listen to Steve Jobs. Like the most brilliant people as well would be people that are willing to be rebellious in that nature and not kind of stay within the mold of what they're told they're supposed to do. So I think that would be a dangerous idea as well, is to not listen to the people that are willing to go outside of the mold.
I never said that. I'm going outside of the norm in my research, like literally
Yeah,
every day. I mean, I'm way outside of the box right there. Believe me. And yet, I think you obviously have to listen to people that, especially in their life, have proven that they can think outside the box and yet use that thinking outside the box constructively, shifting the needle forward
yeah,
for the good of humanity. Jobs, you mentioned, Crick, you mentioned. I mean, these are all people that thought outside the box, but as a result of that, they helped move scientific knowledge forward. They helped move forward technology in a way. So again, that's disruptive thinking isn't innately bad, but psychotropic substances are, especially if they're not used under very careful medical supervision, which is a
yeah.
different subset, used illegally, are dangerous.
Sure. Anything that can create strong effect in a person's life typically has the potential to be dangerous. I think the big reason, this is going to go in another separate direction, but I think that the big reason why a lot of illicit substances are dangerous is because of the immaturity and the lack of awareness around them, because they end up being cast into this like shadow space. Whereas like MDMA was initially created for couples therapy. Now it's like a party drug. Ketamine is something that can be utilized for supporting soldiers or people that go through PTSD to support them in a little bit of an active exogenous disassociative crutch, because you've been so deeply associated to this particular experience. So I think that they're like, and this all stuff with psilocybin and all that stuff. So I think that a big part of why substances are so dangerous, obviously we're going outside of NDE, this is conversation, but I think a big part of it is the fact that they are kind of cast into the shadow space, and we don't talk about it. We just know it's not good. And then they become worse, which I think is kind of like a little bit metaphorical for the concept of someone that is sinning or doing a bad thing. Oftentimes I think those people actually need like more light and more support. Anyways, that's a totally separate thing, and feel free to disagree with me and call me just a stoner.
It really is. I mean, just not to keep beating this one with are here, bam, bam, okay. But above illicit substances of any type, there's no Food and Drug Administration to assure they're pure and assure
Yeah,
what they are. So, I just literally was at a conference this morning where they brought the grim statistics out that over 100,000 people in the United States are dying every year from overdoses of drugs. So when I raise my cautionary note, that's how severe and how devastating illicit drug use is. That's about 70% narcotics do that. But again, there's no FDA. Some people take, illicit narcotic, fentanyl, whatever, and then it's far more pure than they're used to, and boom, they die. So again, just to emphasize the scourge of illicit drug and the massive deaths ongoing in America today. That's
but then
why I'm
but then
cautious.
so much of that is tied into pharmaceutical industry and oxycontin and oxycodone and like all these different things, where it gets a little like the concept of drug needs to be highly nuanced as well, because combo or ayahuasca or psilocybin or something that's traditionally done with these other types of doctors outside of Western doctors, I think it would be disrespectful to them to just put them into the same category or bucket as someone that has addiction to oxycontin or someone that has addiction to cocaine or something of the sort. Anyways, separate conversation.
It's separate conversation. Yeah, I do. Yeah, we're not going there. I'm just going at it medically, and over 100,000 deaths a year, right up to the current year. Anyway, let's move on. Why
Yeah,
don't we
but
shift?
deaths from what? Deaths from what though? Like, what are the
Oh,
deaths from?
the
Yeah,
deaths
but
are,
are they overdose from smoking pot? Are they overdose from psilocybin? Because I think the numbers on that are like astonishingly low, like outstandingly, unbelievably, like disgustingly low. So like when you say drugs, which drugs are you referring to? I think they're white powders in bags that are laced with God knows what, more
you're
often
right.
than not, or
Yeah,
narcotics or amphetamines or things of the sort.
right,
That's actually deeply rooted in the whole Western machine.
right. These are illicit drugs. The study or the conference I was in had to do with narcotics. So their
Yeah,
focus, what their comment was, that 70% of those deaths are due to narcotic overdoses, but
for
30%
sure.
due to other illicit drugs. Other than that, you get into your methamphetamines, you get into your
100%. All garbage, all toxic, all sins, all like evil,
angel dust. I mean,
all
I
bad.
yeah, I can't pull back from the severity of the devastation of illicit drug use and its risk for death. That's
Yeah.
just a brute fact in the United States, or actually worldwide today.
Yeah.
So,
But everything you said is, that's what I'm saying. They're all mysterious white powders found from mysterious, people in mysterious bags. It's the
what?
when getting into like the
They're
the sh, the
all
sh, the,
what?
the narcotics and the amphetamines and all of that stuff. Like that's like, I think at a fundamental level, it's like it's not a tool. It's placing the cannabis and the psilocybin and the ayahuasca and like all the quote unquote like plant medicines things into the same bucket as drug. I think that's where it just becomes, we miss nuance, and we potentially could be casting out something that could be supportive people.
Speaking bluntly, I never put ayahuasca or cannabis in that. I just simply said over 100,000 die from drugs. I didn't really, other than narcotics, methamphetamines, I didn't really expect. There's certainly angel dust. Those are the three I cited. I mean, there's a lot of psychotropic drugs that are a lot less dangerous, and
Yeah.
certainly, some of them under proper medical control are actually pro-social, are going to help people. But
Yeah.
I have a lot of respect for that research and a lot of respect for the potential of anything that helps people and is proven to be safe. I don't have a problem with. So that's where I'm coming from, and I think virtually all other doctors are too, because we really care about our people and we care about them having the best quality of life and not diminishing their quality or duration of life by anything that would be risky.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the thing that near-death experience illuminates for people is it reminds them of the miracle of life, and that reminds them that there's a very good chance that if you come to a place of close to dying, you'll have a momentary reflection in your life and say, oh my effing golly, I have been living in a chronic state of contraction and fear and greed and resentment and guilt my whole life, and I fucking missed it. And that is the kind of where the psychoactive substance realm also elicits certain sensations. I'm not saying anybody should go eat a pile of mushrooms or whatever, but that is the kind of, it's like, what can people do in Western culture or humanity to wake the fuck up? And near death experience seems to do that. What else can people do to wake the fuck up outside of near death experience from your perspective? And is waking the fuck up even a relevant thing? Or is that too polarizing of language?
That's an interesting way to put it. I guess from my point of view, as a near-death, what an interesting discussion here we got going, folks. But I would, again, define your terms, and I know what you're saying, and I actually, agree. I mean, you wake up, and I've used previously the term enlightenment, but what I think would be is spiritual enlightenment. Spiritual is defined as being aware of the existence, the reality of a non-physical realm, who we are, the greater reality of what we are, the greater reality that there is an afterlife, a wonderful afterlife. So if you can help people on that spiritual path, I think that's exactly your, wake the fuck up, at least certainly an important part of that, just expressed differently. But I think that's a really good question. And I want to tell you why, because the great majority of us, thank goodness, aren't going to have a near-death experience. I mean, a Gallup poll in 1982 thought maybe as many as 5% of Americans had an NDE, but heck, I'm one of the 95% that didn't. So how do you go with that? I mean, and you hear about near-death experiences and how they change so much. They embrace the meaning and significance of life, greatly reduced fear of death, greatly increased compassion, love. I mean, this is like everybody. I think most everybody that hears that, it's like, oh, wow. I mean, that's like really getting your life together, moving forward and changing in a very positive, profound way. So at least from my perspective, that has to do with the spiritual. And I think, once again, that can be as individual as each individual is on the planet. And there can be different paths, and those paths may change as your life goes on. I think for some people, their best path is going to be in a conventional standard religion. And I don't have any problem with that. I mean, there's been a lot of people's lives changed dramatically and positively through, I mean, you name it, literally every named religion on the planet. Other people find that their spiritual growth can be through reflecting on their life. I mean, there was they pause, they examine it. What did I do right today? What did I do wrong today? So it's sort of an introspective kind of thing. Meditation has certainly been established as an important tool to help people move forward. Think about it. Meditation, calm, rest, spend a few moments with yourself, clearing your mind, free of stress, free of fear. That can, and you realize you have the potential to do that, and you can carry that forward. Just simply being aware of how that other person felt when you interacted with them. How can I carry that forward, what I've learned in my interactions with other people? What's my real goal? So I think there's just reading a book that is got some strong spiritual content, as anybody may choose. There's no right or wrong path that I can point to that's going to be valid for everybody, or probably even most people. So spiritual awakening and moving forward like that, as near-death experiencers do, without having that kind of individual dramatic event, you start by saying, that's what I want to do, and then what's worked for me previously in my life, how have I moved that path forward, what would I like to do? Try different things. You got to go down that path relatively fearlessly. You got to try new things, explore new things. And I think, soon you'll find something that clicks. If it works and it's moving the needle forward in your spiritual life, do more of it. So I think, and don't be afraid to try it. I think so many people, don't you think, feel like they're boxed in. They feel they can't explore things that they're afraid to learn. They're afraid, what will the people around them think?
What will people think?
Yeah, what will other people think? And I just hope that those can let go of that fear enough to go on that courageous voyage of exploration. That's probably going to yield tremendous fruits. It can literally be significantly positively impactful for the whole rest of your life. So I think I'd strongly encourage that. I mean, read a few near-death experiences if you want, and start to think, wow, what experiences have I had like that? What does that tell me? What should I be looking for in my life? And that can be yet another among many tools for spiritual growth.
Do you think it's possible for a person to be able to, quote unquote, wake the fuck up, and to define that, just like kind of transition away from a life of fear, a life of guilt, a life of shame, a life of trying to be somebody that you think you're supposed to be based off of somebody else's story, just a life of smallness, a life of kind of divorcing yourself of how fucking amazing you are. You're great. You're a goddamn miracle. Like anything other than that, I think is a sin. And so you're living in a very small dream, and waking the heck up for whatever reason is terrifying for most people to come into who the fuck you are.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's really terrifying. I have to guess. I've disagreed more here today than about any talk I've ever had.
Let's keep disagreeing, bro.
Yeah, I'm doing this, but I don't think you can talk about people's emotional reaction to a spiritual enlightening event or events by saying that it's a fearful experience. I think for some people it would be that they have to fearful, and you're right, because I mean, look, you have to let go from all that was familiar and known to you, and move forward in a direction that is unfamiliar and unknown, I think, in a lot of ways. And yet, certainly for some people that letting go is a sense of fear. And yet for other people, you're letting go of what? You're letting go of addiction to those dang drugs we talked about. You're letting go of that guilt, that resentment. You're letting go of a relationship that doesn't work. So I think for a lot of people, once you get over that hurdle, it's empowering. You know that you can make those choices. You know that you can move your life forward. You know that you have the ability to change in a very positive way. And so I think for lots of other people that go down that path of spiritual enlightenment, the dominant emotion would be more one of wonder, of joy, of desire to share what they've learned with other people. So I think it's as varied as there are people on this planet. But I just encourage people to think about that and find your own path. It's and important. That path is there, I think, for each and every person. We all have the potential to grow. We all have that potential to, what did you say again? Something.
Wake the fuck up, Dr. Long.
Okay. That doesn't flow off my tongue easily, but yeah, that's a good point. So, those are all part of what it can be for so many people to have those changes that perhaps they've wanted to, desired, but just never really thought of past. So heck, anybody listening here, think about that. You too, each and every person that is viewing this does have the potential to grow spiritually, to make their life better, and that would be, I hope that's one of the strongest encouragements anybody gets from listening to this, because that's real.
Yeah. Yeah. If you can come to, we can wrap up here. If you can come to a point of having the gift of a reflection on the miracle of your life, you can begin to realize that every moment is extra credit. Every moment is bonus. You own nothing. Everything is a gift. And the mind virus of Western culture, I think, is this is mine and I'm attached to it and I need more of it. You
Sure.
flip that needs to get flipped upside down, where you're like, I'm just, thank you so much for letting me be here. I am so grateful for being here. Like, thank you,
Yeah.
whatever. God, like, just thank you.
Great.
Oh my God, thank you. I'm overwhelmed with gratitude for just being able to be here. Thank you. Anything other than that, I think a person's mildly sick.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. That's just an excellent example of literally enlightenment, of spiritual enlightenment, of embracing growing spirituality within your own life. And never be afraid. I think what's really fascinating, just to jump into this real quick as we get close to the end here, both of us, I firmly believe, are enlightened spiritual beings. But I think the two of us have gone down very different paths to get there. This is a case study. Hey, all viewers, you too can choose your own path. There are many, many different paths, all leading to that same light, that same spiritual awakening, and that same positive growth in your life. And if the two of us aren't a most vivid example of that, I don't know what is. So, I'll follow your own path. There's literally light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. I really enjoy this conversation. I appreciate getting to disagree in kind of like a fun way. Hopefully that was good, right? You're okay with some disagreements, right?
Absolutely. I love this, and I think it's really this is really going to turn out to be one of my favorite shows, and I hope that's true for the
Oh, cool.
viewers too. But
Likewise. Yeah.
yeah, so I think that's really, and again, it's a message really ultimately of hope, how two people can have different views and yet discuss it rationally and respectfully, and actually grow in respect for each other. So I think this is just, a sort of a vivid example that, if everybody could embrace that with the people, it's all good. We're all here on planet Earth. We're all in this together. There is great spiritual teachers, and certainly a very common theme in near-death experiences, that of unity. We're all in this together. We're all ultimately one and the same. And it's just, all of us are beautiful in our own separate individual ways, as the show vividly demonstrates.
Amazing, man. Well, so people can go deeper into your stuff by going to NDERF.org, where there's 5,000 odd or 4,000 plus, but 5,000 odd stories, different people. And then is there anything else that would be interesting to leave people with from here to go deeper into your stuff, or just in general, where should people go from here?
Yeah. If you go to the NDERF.org website, the top tab says experiences. If you drop that down, you'll see a compilation of what we call exceptional experiences. And here's a challenge to anybody. I think if you read 10 of those exceptional experiences, exceptional near-death experiences, it could change your life. It could provide enlightenment. It could provide understanding. It can help you to understand people that have a near-death experience, should you encounter them anytime in your life, or even if you have it yourself. But I think that's, is free literally to everybody in the world. And I think it has a very powerful potential to help people grow spiritually. And that's really what it's all about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, Dr. Long. Thank you all for being here. That is it. That is all. I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed that episode, you might also enjoy this episode over here, as well as this one over here. Thank you for subscribing. Appreciate you. I'll see you in the next video.